Hi, everybody. It's the show with Ron where we add context and commentary to the headlines. And it's time for a roundup of some of the recent headlines. A lot has happened. Trump is still, the campaign for Trump is still stumbling, I would say, uh, giving the media opportunities to attack it with whatever it was that happened in Arlington Cemetery, and now with some supposed clarification on Trump's stance on abortion. So nothing's really changed there. The momentum that has shifted back and forth throughout the summer is still running against Trump. But Harris still has some ground to cover, and that's what we're going to look at today. So we've got the wobbling Trump trades. Harris rise have Wall Street rethinking bets. You see uh, big institutional investors and people who know about uh, what they're talking about when they trade stocks. It's not me, but those people make their trades based on the best bets for who's going to win, and they hedge their positions towards that. Trump wants the big corporate tax cut back. Harris wants to raise the taxes, et cetera, et cetera. Harris has floated a kind of a vague middle class tax cut. So sometimes you might look at the stock market as a barometer, as an informal barometer of the conglomeration of thought, the totality of thought put together as to who is going to win or lose. And so we have these stories about the stock market preparing itself perhaps for an era that's not as friendly with the big corporate tax cuts as it was with when it was thought over the summer, a lot of the summer, that Trump was a shoo-in. And we got Kamala Harris, and we're going to talk about her first interview today. It was kind of unusual to have presidential candidates who don't participate in interviews, who don't really take questions directly from the press in an informal manner. But we know why Kamala Harris doesn't do so. It's because, and you can see lots of videos about this, she's famous for her word salad, for her long-winded, wordy, and often giggly responses to questions from the media, which even from the media which largely supports the Democrats, presents the Democrats' narrative without question in the United States, those media outlets attacked her quite a lot in the first 2 years of the Biden administration. Of course, that's all disappeared now that she's the candidate. Plus, Biden himself, obviously because of his inability to speak clearly, and perhaps that he is senile, he gave hardly any interviews with the press or press conferences at all during his time, during the last few years. And it's strange we're in a time where the media doesn't pick up on that and just, attack the administration in power. It is my whole life, I've grown up in the United States with the media. There are people, remember like 60 Minutes, so it's known around the world. There are guys like Mike Wallace, Ed Bradley. You've got the who are the two guys, All the President's Men, who broke open the Watergate situation. They were skeptical about everything. They would kind of on the attack to whatever party was in power. But that has disappeared in recent years, and the present administration has been treated with kid gloves. And I think that happened all the way back from during the Obama administration. It is a shocking situation. We talked about this where even the media themselves, the commentators were just almost reading the press releases of the Democratic National Convention in the way they reported on it. So we have a vice presidential candidate who's now the presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, who was appointed in that position. They had an election. Biden was elected, but they threw all those and they just said, she's going to be it anyway. So I mean, this is all legal. This is the way the system works. When people think in America, they're voting in the primaries, their vote doesn't mean anything, obviously. So I thought, if they're going to do that, maybe the Democrats should pay back the money that the government spent on all the elections. I'm being a little mean there, but okay. We got the new election map. And I often bring up, especially if you're outside the United States, sometimes the media presents a certain narrative that one candidate has this many and the other candidate has that many. But the overall vote tally in the United States is not what matters. In fact, some of the recent elections, the person who got the lower number of votes won the presidency. So it's because each state. I don't want to. This I could make a whole video on this. On the surface of it, you say, well, shouldn't the most votes win? Well, for the United States, that would mean that maybe candidates would concentrate their efforts in the high population areas and ignore the rest of the country. And that's what Hillary Clinton sort of did in her election campaign in 2016. She ignored some of states like Wisconsin, thinking that they were in the bag, but Trump had very limited funds compared to Hillary Clinton during that election, and their campaign spent in a very targeted way and turned that state and turned the election to him. So this electoral system makes every state count, so to speak, but it also sometimes doesn't, because at this point, most states are spoken for. We know that the majority of people in each of these states are either going to vote Democrat or Republican. So then we have the swing states, and what happens is that in any state, if the voters in that state vote just one vote more than the other guy, the winner then gets the total of all the electoral votes. So each state is like that. And then there's just a few states that are toss-ups. And this was probably from last week. So it's probably changed since then. We've got, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona. We've got a lot of these old Rust Belt states here that have very liberal areas, but they're also the beneficiary of really Republican policies that started in the 80s and that were supported by the Democrats until very recently, that sent a lot of jobs overseas to our adversaries, to China. And it's a hollowing out of the job market in those states. These yellow states are the states that are toss-ups. And interestingly enough, you see some of these states, they have these lines through them. These are states, not all states give all their electoral votes to the winners. A couple states split them. And so we got Nebraska and Maine here. They just have a few electoral votes, but they split them between, I guess proportionally, something like that probably, between the candidates as they get the votes. And this just points up the idea, which I've tried to explain, that every state in the United States it's like its own little country, and it's a confederation. The United States is a confederation of that. Each state calls its police by a different name. Sometimes they don't call them police. They have different names. You go to so many other countries where everything is very much top down, I guess, federalized, where there you have uniform laws. Even the traffic laws from state to state can be very different. So you got to watch out going from country to country in the United States. Okay. Now, inside the U.S. media, after the convention, except for Fox News, which is rabidly kind of right-leaning, And in the same way, most of the rest of the U.S. media is very much biased towards the Democrats. Fox News is biased towards the Republican, and in a kind of ridiculous way that almost invalidates them as a kind of influencer. But the whole rest of the media, all the big, uh, essentially, has become non-skeptical about the Democrats. And so after the campaign, or after the convention, the Democratic National Convention, excuse me, we have almost a uniform, within the United States, a uniform cheerleading of the Harris campaign, saying how wonderful she is, and so we have hope, or was it no, joy? This is the new buzzword for the campaign, joy, that everybody's using. The media has been cheerleading. So it was kind of interesting and shocking to see a major news outlet. Of course, it's not in the United States, it's the BBC that doesn't really have a horse in the race, supposedly. And so they just say Kamala Harris campaign is light on policy, but that's helped transform the race. Kind of shocking, to read something like this after the convention, where the media in the United States, except for Fox, was uniformly glowing with praise for the Harris campaign. So we come to the interview. Now, again, we have BBC that has some actual articles not praising Harris's efforts. I mean, here they're talking to undecided voters who are not quite convinced. Here was another. This is something, again, that certainly is downplayed in the American media, this kind of criticism of the Democrats during the political cycle now. And we get to U.S. News outlets, NPR, perhaps maybe the most left-leaning, the most pro-democratic. Of course, they don't say that. They say they're completely objective, as all the media continues to do, I think. And they just put down the verdict. She passed the test of doing an unscripted interview. Imagine that, a presidential candidate being able to do an unscripted interview. However, this interview was with CNN. It was highly edited, and it wasn't only with her, it was another person. So clearly the Democrats are playing it safe in rolling her out as a candidate and trying to make her presentation better as a candidate. Of course, they can depend on the media to back them up. Democrats are breathing a sigh of relief of how she will do in a debate, because upcoming debate with Trump. More praise here for her. She's not an ideologue, which of course, the Republicans would say anyone they're running against is a far crazy left ideologue. This always makes me think of Gore. Al Gore, who lost the election to Bush. I don't think he really lost it. It was really Al Gore won, and it was. If anybody on the Republican side still thinks that the election in 2020 that they lost to Trump was stolen in some way, if you really think that, and you're crazy if you do, but if you think that, you just say, well, that's just payback for what happened in 2000 when Gore got screwed out of the election. But the point I'm trying to make was Gore is so right-wing. He's essentially a Republican. He was as ideologically right as George W. Bush was. So it was how funny that in intervening years, he got to be painted as a left-wing crazy because of his climate change talk, which is a whole nother issue. And, anytime you talk about any of these political things, there's all these cul-de-sacs you can go off on. And I think I'm pretty good at explaining things outside of an ideological bent, so I love to talk about them. Hey, can you like and subscribe to this? Because I mentioned the word Trump, because I mentioned the word Biden, and now Harris, I'm sure, I can't promote this, and I actually think it's this video is kind of suppressed a little by the YouTube algorithm, but I think I try to be middle of the road and explain what's really going on here to give some context. So I think I deserve more viewers. I don't know. You could be the judge of that. So please like and subscribe. Okay, here's CNN's own response to the Harris interview. And again, it's sort of it's kind of a puff piece, which I suppose we shouldn't have to expect a puff piece from a major news outlet like CNN. But again, it's in this era in U.S. history, the media seems most of it seems to be quite subservient. This to the Democrats. This is not good. Even if you're a Democrat, you would say, wait a second. We have to be honest. We have a lot of influence over the media. The media does kind of what we say. It carries the narrative. But the problem is, should it? Because in many ways it discredits and further polarizes the electorate in the way the media tried to, for years now, tried to tell people that the videos they saw of Joe Biden acting senile were fake or not real, and he was just fine. Then it's all shown to be false. The whole facade falls down. I think the Democrat, it's better to have a media that is skeptical. Let's bring back the 60-minute days. Let's bring back the journalists of the 70s, while they're dead now, but who were skeptical and would ask tough questions. It's better for both parties rather than all this softball stuff we have now. However, Washington Post, we have an opinion piece. This is part of their newsletter, so it's not really ideological, I don't think, for the right. And they have some skeptical things to say about Harris. These sorts of ideas are slowly filtering out in the media in the U.S., talking about how they bring up in this little interview how, the Biden White House has done hardly any interviews. And this Harris interview came 40 days after the end of the convention, or after she was appointed as the candidate to do any interview, which is bizarre. I mean, normally, a candidate is just as many interviews you can get in the day, and then they fall asleep, and then they get up in the morning and do it again. And this point here where they say, as the Democrats become a party that runs against the mainstream news media, well, obviously not, since the mainstream news media has been in the United States is very non-skeptical of Harris, unskeptical of Harris, of the campaign, and basically supports it. However, the point they're making here is interesting about how the Democrats have to, or have decided to, circumvent some of the mainstream news media to make sure that Harris, who, as we explained, has a reputation for not being good at public speaking of all things, because of giggling and long-winded answers, that she in her new entree to the American public is presented in a good, proper light, and doesn't make any mistakes. So this leads us to this sort of thing. And this is a syndrome you have sometimes during campaigns, but most often after campaigns, where both sides have to say, but I think, Republicans and Democrats get it in their heads that we explained our issues clearly, the people know the issues, but yet they didn't choose us. How can that be? It's illogical. So you get... This started, I remember in the 80s, when the Republicans were so ascendant and the Democrats were saying, we explain, people don't want low taxes. They don't want to rebuild the military, which will just start more wars and maybe World War III. They don't want all these economic policies from Reagan. Why are they voting for him? So you come up with ideas of like, oh, they just like him as a person. He's presenter. A lot of this is what they call coping, because I think people do choose. But here we have a couple kind of coping articles. Here's the New Yorker, which I'm sure is an interesting magazine, but it's certainly left leaning, full of maybe smug intellectual people like myself. I kind of like it. So they have to say, why does anybody like Trump? We told them they shouldn't like him. We said he was a fascist. And there was a lot of this that happened after Hillary lost in 2016 as well. The media became baffled. We told everyone not to vote for him. Why they vote for him? So this is some COPE that explains that they had some different polls and things, and extracting this that people are voting for Trump because they don't know the information. They didn't know the right information the media is telling them, which in this day and age, there are reasons not to vote for Trump, a lot of good reasons, but I think a lot of people understand exactly who Trump is and exactly the dangers, but they still want to vote for him because they listen to those issues like immigration, the economy, the inflation. They see that, and a lot of what's happened in the media and from the Democrats have been to kind of deny that, and issues with Biden too, trying to tell how senile Biden obviously was, but yet the media almost with one voice told people that was not the case. He's fine. Anyway, here's one COPE, and here's some Republican COPE. Republicans better get on the ball. They haven't made the case against Harris. The clock is ticking. So I didn't pay for this. But the Republicans are saying that, again, this guy in the whole article says, we've laid out the issues, the economy and Biden and immigration, and what reason could people possibly have for voting Democratic? And the answer is Trump's doing a bad job. The Republicans are doing a bad job. That's in presenting their argument, and they're undisciplined, as they kind of always have been in the Trump era. That may be a little closer to the reality right now. And finally, I wanted to squeeze this in. We've talked about this sort of issue in the past, whether it's good to censor or not. We know that during the COVID era, and there were court cases that first ruled against the White House on this, and then were later overturned. I'm not even sure what the status of them now what the status is, but this has to do with kind of back channel talking that the White House did to social media platforms to pressure them to censor certain information or certain opinions that people had on the internet. Now, some of these were most likely, a lot of them were crazy opinions about certain things like vaccines and stuff. But I was making the point last year on this, that the effect of censoring those viewpoints on certain vaccines and perhaps some of the health risks associated with them, which you can talk about outside the United States, and doctors will say, for the COVID vaccine, there's one company, don't get the first round of that because that's the one that has the heart thing. So they'll just tell you that. But you can't even talk about that on social media. So I'm not saying anything is true about that one way or another, but I was making the case last year that it's probably better in our society, especially where everybody has an opinion and voice on social media, to let people express themselves and fight it out in social media and say what they want to say, even if we don't all agree with that or we think it is demonstrably false, because other people will come in and try to correct that. And for a long time, I think we viewed the internet that way, that it has a self-correcting apparatus to it. You know, like Wikipedia is based on that concept. Now, it may be that foreign actors, you know, China gets 1,000 people online, and maybe AI bots trying to change opinion. But I think probably overall society is better served by having a little more free speech than less free speech. When you have the less free speech, it has led to the politicization of some of these fake opinions or false opinions, or you know, misinformation. But if you put that out there, people will. I think it's better to let people address that. And well, it doesn't matter what I think, because I believe and I can see that the next time around there will not be this kind of censorship. So it will be more difficult for a future administration to kind of clamp down on what it deems misinformation. And maybe you know, on the surface of it, I would say, yeah, people shouldn't be able to say certain things about the COVID vaccine, or even say they don't want to take it. Those things were censored. But if you agree with that, you have to think, well, what would happen if a different administration was in power? People say so many things about the Trump administration. I think it's a little bit overblown. You know, he's a known quantity. But if you're a never Trumper person and you still think the media should be censored in some way, well, what if an administration you don't like a Trump administration, gets in there? What might they decide to censor through some back channel that you never know about? That's the danger. So it's always better to be a little more free rather than a little less free. And I think that's about it for today. Gosh, a lot of controversial opinions. I see, again, just by openly discussing something like this vaccine situation, just by openly discussing censorship, I'm censored. My channel is censored, and I can't promote it, and it's probably suppressed, shadow banned by the algorithm as well. So I don't know. I see other people with big political channels. I'd love to have a big political channel. I think I have some good things to say. I think, I don't know. Again, that's up to you. But please like and subscribe, and watch some of my old videos. Like those as well. And I will see you next time. And we're going to keep on this very interesting political election cycle, and keep looking at the context in the news, so the media doesn't get us wound up or pointed in the wrong direction about what's really going on. See you next time. Bye-bye.